All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. It's my pleasure to introduce Cory Derringer, who is a student at the University of Northern Iowa. Yes, all right. And he is now the president of the University of Northern Iowa Freethinkers and Inquirers, I think, yes? Oh, look, it's written on his shirt. Anyway, which is UniFi, which is a great name and a fantastic group. And they do all sorts of incredible things. Definitely encourage you to check him out. But an important thing about him, if I am not correct, is that he did not found his group. Is that correct? No? He did not. No, he is the second wave of leadership, third wave of leadership. And so he's in a very good position to talk to you about what he's going to talk to you about, which is what happens if you get hit by a beer truck. Well, what happens? Well, you die, but your group, hopefully, will live on. I guess it depends on the beer truck, but anyway. Cory is going to tell you about succession planning, so please join me in welcoming him.
All right, awesome. Can everyone hear me? Is it okay if I stand like, is this all right? Okay.
Move around, we should laugh, Mikey.
No, okay, we'll be all right. I will speak loudly. At one time I was in theater, so I can do this.
Recording. It's just, it won't record well.
Oh, okay. Should be like little waiting music right now. There you go. Awesome. Okay, so my talk is called Successful Succession, How to Ensure Your Group Survival After You Graduate. So here's like an overview. I want to go over what is succession and why do you need to plan it. How do most groups plan succession? Is democracy the best way to plan succession? Then I want to introduce what I'll call the UniFi model, although we're probably not the first group to do it this way, as a viable alternative to democracy. And then I want to finish with some other tools that are not related to whether your group is democratic or non-democratic, but they'll help your succession planning nonetheless. So first of all, what is succession? Basically, succession is the future of your group. It's one of the most important things that you will think about. It's the leaders who will replace your leaders. No matter how you organize your group, the key to succession is always going to be planning. Know in advance who is going to be taking over when you graduate. So why is succession planning important? Graduation is death for far too many groups. I know, just off the top of my head, I know that KU Soma used to be, I think they were founded in like 1999, had someone really passionate that graduated and then they died and then they got resurrected again. But the dying part is the bad part. So we want to avoid that, and the way to avoid that is making sure that you can actually groom your successors, plan the next generation of your leadership. How do most groups do this? There are actually three. I think there are three ways to do this. Three succession models. The first one is democracy. People vote on the next president of the group, the next treasurer and vice president, and all of that good stuff. The second is what I'll call pseudo-democracy. This is actually becoming, I think, fairly popular. Oh, my slide cuts off a little bit there. Sorry. This is actually, I think, fairly popular among secular groups, where it's mostly democratic, but the president or whatever just has like a really strong hand in how things are run for the next generation. I know of at least one person in particular that does this like very, very heavily. Still calls it a democracy. I think that's a little sketchy, but all right. But yeah, it gives you some measure of control over the group without appearing undemocratic. I think this is actually a better model for succession planning than democracy, because it gives you that control. And finally, the UniFi model. And I'm gonna talk more about this later, but I just wanted to introduce it as a third option right now. And we'll get more specific later. So let's split them up. I want to do like a little bit of like pros and cons kind of thing. We have democracy. Pros, voting, yay. Voting is a humanist value. You can embody that humanist value in your group. Cons, democracies, like I said, they're very hard to plan. It's just impossible. Oh, it's really, the bane of my existence. Okay, so you have pseudo-democracies. Pros, it's kind of like democracy. It looks like democracy, it smells like democracy. Your members might think it's democracy. But the cons, let's be honest here, this is not very honest. You could call it democracy, but if it's not, then it's not. So the UniFi model is really like an intellectually honest alternative. It's not democratic. We can embrace that and like move forward from there. So how can we make sure that our leaders have the qualities that we're looking for in the next generation? So we're talking about professionalism, competence, approachability, responsibility. Professionalism, I think, is very important. If you have someone from Campus Crusade for Christ who wants to meet with your group and talk about having a debate or co-sponsoring some event, maybe you're into interfaith or trans faith. Figured I'd plug that in there. You don't want to send the person to the meeting who is wearing full pirate regalia, right? This is, I mean, that has its place in your group, obviously. That's really fun. That's not the person you want to send to the meeting with Campus Crusade. Competence, you want the best person for the job. This goes pretty much without saying. You want people who are approachable from your membership. You don't want your members to be intimidated by the leaders. And finally, you want people who are responsible. You want the people, you know, who, when they say they're going to do something, you know they're going to do it. So here's how you can do that. And this is planning. There's different ways of planning. I like all of these. I've used all of these. These have been used on me. The first one is delegating projects. This one is actually really awesome. We do this at UniFi a lot. If you have someone who is like kind of an upstarter in your group that's like, you know, hey, I want to get involved, but you don't know if they're ready yet. You want to test their abilities, see where they are. Give them something to work on. We had one girl who wanted to get involved, and she was like, hey, you know, I really want to be involved with UniFi. And we're like, hey, Banned Books Week is coming up, right? And we gave her that project, and it flopped, and we knew not to put her in charge of anything. It was great. Then on the other hand, we had, you know, this kid named Adam Shannon, and he's like, hey, I want to get really involved. And we're like, okay, well, you know, how about you organize, you know, our blog posting schedules or something like that. And he's rocks it. And now we found out that he's really great at web design, and he's writing our new website from scratch because he's a rock star. Delegating projects. Encouraging people to apply. UniFi has 2 tiers of leadership team. We have the officers and the chairs. Out of the officers, there are 4 besides myself. All 4 of them had to be nudged to apply. They're definitely the best people for the job. They just didn't necessarily know it at the time. So that's you know, something to keep in mind. Encourage people to apply. Don't be like me. This is actually the product of a conversation I had with Evan Clark yesterday over sushi. And we were talking about how it's important for your next generation of leaders to be competent, to be qualified to do the job, and everything like that. But it's also important for them to have their own kind of way of doing it. You know, don't stifle their creativity. I took over for Trevor Buckman in April, and if I had to do this job like Trevor, I don't think I would make it. I think I would die. He was, I'm pretty sure at one point, the most hated student on our campus, mostly because of Blasphemy Rights Day. The first Blasphemy Day, he actually had to be escorted back to his dorm by campus security because they thought he was going to get beat up. I couldn't do that. I have to be a little bit of a friendlier face. So basically, you know, encourage your leaders to, you know, to be themselves, but to also be competent and approachable and responsible and all those good things. And then a last example, this is actually an example of delegation, but we have a young woman named Kayla Merrill who applied for an officer position this year, and UniFi is not a democracy. She didn't make the selection process or whatever because she wasn't very involved before this. She came to Darwin Week, she was really excited about it, but she had never been to really anything else. We're like, okay, how about this? She was really excited about doing a kind of out campaign thing. She really loves the Richard Dawkins Foundation, wants to do something similar to that at our campus. And we said, okay, in September, let's do a 4-day out campaign, and we'll culminate it in our 4th annual Flying Spaghetti Monster Dinner. And now she's like running that, and she's doing a great job. So delegating projects is, I think, probably the most important one there. Okay, so let's elaborate more on this UniFi model for succession planning. And we had democracy. Sounds sketchy, I think. So really what I want to emphasize here is that I don't think there is one model of succession planning that is good for every group or the best for every group. This has worked for our organization through 4 years and 3 presidencies. So basically it works for us. Your mileage may vary. So this is the essence of, I think, the UniFi approach. Democracy doesn't work for us. We have, instead, everything in UniFi kind of centers around the UniFi presidency. It's kind of a benevolent dictatorship. The current president appoints the next president by March 15th. There's a 1-month kind of intermission period. I guess that's probably not the right word there. But the new president takes over on April 15th with the new officer team. So during that month, we have applications for the leadership team. We have our applicants fill out an online form. It's linked into Google Docs, and it's really, really smooth. We'll talk about Google Docs a little bit in a bit. And then they sit for an interview. So here's a screenshot of our application. You can see, name, phone number, email, whatever. Then it's got what position they're interested in, and at the bottom, you can't see it because I couldn't fit it on my screen, is the times that they can sit for an interview, and then resume information. And we actually encourage people to submit resumes for our leadership positions. And it's really cool because we can generate competition this way. We had 6 openings for the last round of selections for our leadership team, and we had, I think, 11 people apply. So, it creates competition. As long as it stays healthy competition, I think that's a great thing. The interview is really the meat of our selection process. The key to the interview is to have prepared questions and unprepared questions. The prepared questions are the questions we give ahead of time. We're like, hey, we want to know how you feel about how the new atheism fits within the movement. Or we want to know, should we be doing more interfaith or transfaith work? Should we be doing less? Why or why not? These big questions, you give them ahead of time, and that gives you an idea of where they stand on things. You give them think on their feet questions during the interview, and that gives you an idea of, well, how well they can think on their feet. You say, oh, okay, we had the Flying Spaghetti Monster dinner in a week, and our venue fell through. Or, the people we were going to debate with can't show up anymore, something like that. These things actually happen, and it gives you an idea of their thought process. So that's kind of important too. This is kind of the pro-con breakdown of the UniFi model. I think it's very worth it. The pros, you ensure that your leaders are qualified, you avoid popularity contests, and you groom your successor. I think the first one is by far the most important. It makes sure that your leaders, they're all of those 4 things that we talked about earlier. They're competent, they're approachable, they're responsible, and they're whatever the 4th one was. They're very important though. And really, if you can do this, if you can ensure that your leaders are qualified, you're already on the way to grooming your successor. Because if one of these people in your leadership team takes over as the next president, you know that they're going to do an okay job. Cons, it's not a democratic system. And you have to explain that to your members in a way, you have to explain it delicately. No, sorry, we don't do voting, we do a selection process. UniFi doesn't even have meetings per se. We have events, and we have a lot of them. We have officer meetings that everyone's invited to, but almost no one shows up because if people, if they're not expressing interest in the leadership aspect, if they just want to be a member of the group, and most people do, we don't want to make them sit through a meeting and make them vote on stuff. It's also possible for members to feel alienated from the leadership. This is something we work on constantly to make sure that it doesn't happen. We're always talking to our members, what do you want, what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong? But there's also the freedom here to do something that our members don't necessarily like. Last year we had to make a tough decision with Blasphemy Rights Day. We had members of our group who wanted to make it even more inflammatory than the first year. And I think the leadership team knew that there was a bad idea, so we wanted to do a little bit of image control, so we toned it down a little bit. And our members didn't like it, but we didn't have to worry about not getting voted back in. And it made our group look better on campus because of it. Other cool stuff that doesn't have anything to do with succession planning models. This is just really cool stuff that every group should be doing to aid in succession planning. The first one is Google. Do Google. Google, Gmail, and Google Docs are awesome. We have a Gmail account. It's contact@unifreethought.com. That forwards to the Gmail accounts of every officer and our advisor. We also do Google Docs. Google Docs is awesome. Like I said, we have 2 tiers of leadership. If I want to put something in the UniFi officers folder instead of the UniFi leadership folder, because I don't want the chairs to see it for some reason, I can put it in there and I can do the share settings for each folder. So it kind of lets you control the flow of information there. I'm sounding more and more like Stalin as we go on. Instruction manuals are kind of the last thing. We have our officers do like a how-to manual for their position at the end of each year. And it's basically, it eases the transition into the next group of leaders. It's cuts back on the amount that you have to relearn. And I think that's actually a great idea that every group should be doing. So to conclude, 3 main models for succession. We have the democratic model, the pseudo-democratic model, and the unified benevolent dictatorship model. Is democracy the best way to plan succession? It depends on your group, but I would say by and large, no. I would say pseudo-democracy is better than democracy, but not as good as the UniFi model. And I hope I have presented that as an alternative to democracy here. And then we ended with those tips for succession planning. So here's the take-home message. If you insist on being democratic, I have no idea why, but you can still plan succession, and doing so to the largest extent possible is vital to the success of your group. Basically, I'm trying to take those democratic groups and push them to becoming pseudo-democratic, and take the pseudo-democratic groups and maybe like nudge them into like kind of taking that last step and just embracing their totalitarian. Not really totalitarianism, but you know what I mean. So thank you very much, and yeah, any questions? I have 5 minutes, so if anyone has any questions or any bones to pick with me. Yeah?
Could you elaborate what you mean by a pseudo-democratic model?
Yeah, I mean, the example I was thinking of is, I don't think he'll mind that I'm calling him out like this, but the example I'm thinking of is Conrad with Soma. They have a democratic model. He has a heavy hand in that model, and that's very purposeful. I think he's 2/3 of the way to where UniFi is, and I think he should just take the plunge. But that's just my opinion.
I don't know if you have to go the pseudo-scientific or the pseudo-democratic way of still having a hand in things. You can do things like grooming leaders and giving certain people responsibility, encouraging them, and then giving them the ability to, when it comes election time, to say, this is what I've done, and this is what I can do, and this is why you should elect me. And I don't think that maintaining total control is necessary for that grooming process, and I think there's a way in which it kind of stifles creativity, because it gives people the impression, if I want to get into leadership, I have to do these things. And I mean, there's obviously pros and cons. There are a whole bunch of different ways to run effective groups, and I think it's totally possible to have an open democratic system where you can be honest about saying, like, look, like, this is somebody in our group that we want to groom, like, let's give them stuff. And you can do that in an open way, and when it comes election time, say, these are the things that I've done, and this is why you should elect me. And I think for the most part, that's probably good. Like, I think you should take pause if more than half of your membership is willing to vote for somebody that you didn't groom and give all this responsibility instead of the person that you did. That should give you pause, right?
Right, to some extent. I mean, like I said, there's no model that's going to be correct for everybody. But I do think that there is value in having this kind of. I guess what I'm looking at is kind of like nightmare scenarios, right? We have, like, let's say you put your time and effort into grooming this person, and your group is like, no, we like this such and such other person better. I mean, we can call them Fred and Barney. We like Barney better than Fred, even though you've been grooming Fred, for this amount of time. I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. You could have a leader, a president that's just not prepared, that doesn't know what's going on. Also, I mean, and this is not true of most democratic groups, but sometimes you can get really extreme scenarios. I know a group that I won't mention by name who they actually vote on the positions themselves, on like creating officer positions and their responsibilities, and they created an officer position called Batman. You can't put Batman on your resume. I think that's a problem. I don't know.
You should ask somebody that.
Oh, go ahead.
So did UniFi start with this system, or was there a transition period? And can you discuss how the members may react to the transition period?
Okay. Well, I mean, UniFi was never really democratic. Cody actually was the founder of UniFi.
Okay.
He kind of appointed Trevor, and Trevor made it more of a dictatorship a little bit. But you had your hand up since the beginning.
But I think there's something to be said about that, is because I don't know a terrible lot about a lot of the groups here, but size is something that you have to consider when succession planning. You can't have 5 officers if you only have 5 people in your group. If you have 75 people in your group, officers is something that you can do, and then you have to pick how you appoint those officers, and I think there's arguments you make both sides, but yeah. So and that comes into whether or not democracy is a viable option. If you have 5 people voting, doesn't make any sense to me. If you have 75, maybe there's an argument to be said there. But yeah, to answer the question, no, UniFi did not ever start out with the democratic process.
I have time for one question because I have like 1 minute.
Okay, so what is exactly that inspired you personally to be groomed and apply, go through this entire process to be where you are now? I mean, did you just start as a member and just like, obviously you said members, there's a slight disconnect from the leadership just inherently, which is not necessarily bad, but what got you like just interested in taking over and running this shit?
For me, I actually got involved after the first Darwin Week, which is right before what we sometimes refer to as the Buckman Revolution. So like Trevor took over the group, and he kind of changed the structure of the officer corps. Brought in new officer positions and things like that. There wasn't a whole lot of interest in the leadership when I became a member of the group and when I applied for this position. And I was one of those people that was nudged. It was like, hey, I think you would do a good job of this. And I was like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, I think you would be a good vice president. And apparently he had faith in me because I bombed my interview, and he still gave me the job. But that's actually all the questions I have time for because we're at 0.
Questions actually, because we started right on time, and anyway.
I can take more questions.
2 more questions, how about?
2 more? Okay, in the back.
Was there any particular thing you did to make members comfortable when they expressed discomfort or skepticism about not being democratic?
It almost...
Did you calm their fears or their complaints?
It almost never comes up, to be honest with you. It's one of those things that so if it does come up, it's kind of like a joke, like, oh, har har, dictatorship, haha. They love it. As bad as that sounds, I think our members are pretty satisfied with our group, and we have quite a bit of participation that I think testifies to that. Down here.
We let people go to officer meetings is another thing. Like if people think they don't have any input, we say come to our officer meetings, and you can still give your input, but you just are not an official officer.
Yeah.
Do you have any problems with people complaining that, the president just doesn't like me, that's why I didn't get selected? In any group of people, I'm in a couple organizations, there's never total, everyone likes everybody. There's always, rivalries or whatever. And, I can see, if our group changes to this model, I'm the current president, who I want for next president, that's good. But what if that person that doesn't like the best person next, or what if the best person right now I just don't like, and I'm using my biases blinding me? Do you ever have that problem where people complain about that, or have you noticed that?
If we have, it's never got up to me. I've never heard it. No. But the way we try to solve that is just by being as professional as possible. That's why we have people submit resumes. That's why we have interviews. It's really like the officer selection process is a compilation of we have interviews and past experiences and resumes and applications and everything else. We try to be as objective as possible and as professional as possible. There's always going to be some kind of human error possibility there. Did you want to add something to that answer, Cody?
Yeah.
Really quick.
Part of
Sorry.
the interviewing process is that there's not one person making the decision, and often those people don't agree. And there's a process that controls for whether or not 1% is biased towards one person.
So there's actually a voting that does.
It's not. There's no vote, but it's.
Same way that you go through an interview process. There's a lot of people that make the final decision, but it's in no way a vote.
The people that sat in on the interviews for officers this last year were myself, Trevor's our former president, and this year I kind of did things differently. I picked the vice president first, and then he helped me select the rest of the team. So we had 3 people, actually 4 because one of our officers was graduating and she sat in on the interviews as well. So,
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.